really don't want to continue live launching anymore. That's not what I want to do. So one thought I had was, do I shift my 4th episode to actually be kind of a condensed version of my former webinar, using that? And then do I add in some kind of urgency? Do I talk about the price point and all that? Or do I just I'm trying to think about how much do I match what I used to do?
This is a great question, first and foremost, because Evergreen and live launching is very different. And so I will say this.
All right, we are back again with another coaching episode with Jenny Matthews, who is a mental health therapist. And we're going to be talking about her new private podcast, Lead Magnet. New as in less than a week old. And it's a lead magnet that I think was originally a PDF that she converted to a private podcast. So we're going to talk about best practices for setting this up. We might dive a little bit into the content of that podcast because her goal is to ultimately sell a course on the back end of this podcast. So, Jenny, welcome to the show. We're excited to chat with you today.
Thank you. So excited for the opportunity.
Yeah, this should be a fun one. We love a good lead magnet. We obviously just released our lead magnet on lead magnets, audio lead magnets, of course. And so this will be a great way for us to dive into some messaging, dive into, structure of the private podcast and all of that. So Jenny, why don't you briefly introduce yourself, a little bit about your business, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jenny Matthews, and I'm a licensed mental health therapist in the state of Minnesota, and I own a private practice called State of Mind Therapy. And it's myself, one other person full-time who's a clinician, and then another clinician who actually is my husband. He's part-time in the practice, though. And we specialize in treating adults who have anxiety disorders and OCD. And so they're, constantly overthinking, avoiding, struggling with over-control. And so we really work on giving them best practices around how to untangle from all that so that they can have a bigger life and not feel so stuck in, avoiding the things that scare them. And so that's a big part of what we do. And so one niche area in that is working with fearful flyers. And so that came about because my husband before he entered the mental health field, he has an early career in aviation. And so he's got a whole life before this, and then came to work, with anxiety disorders. And then I used to struggle with a fear of flying. So we saw just a really fun opportunity to come together and teach people about how to overcome their fear of flying. And so we do in-person workshops here at our airport. And that's been really fun and a really just cool part of our business. And as part of that, definitely branched into offering that online with 2 different courses so that we can reach more people who, can't access us here. Plus, we wanted some passive income as well. So that is us in a nutshell.
I love this. This is so, so cool. So I have several members of my extended family that fit this avatar. So this is going to be a lot of fun because I definitely have some fearful flyers in my family. And so I guess before we jump in and start talking about the lead magnet, I would like you, because ultimately we're talking about 2 different conversion points here. One is we want people to opt into the lead magnet. So we want as many people getting their ears on that content. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then ultimately we want them to purchase one of the 2 courses. So before we jump in, why don't you tell us a little bit about the 2 courses? And if you could, because there's 2 different options, if you could help our listeners understand what might be the most appropriate path versus one versus the other, and who typically buys one versus the other.
Yeah, great question. So the first is a mini course. So it's about an hour. It was a live workshop I did, and then, sold it basically on Evergreen from there. And it's a mini course for basically simple strategies to help people overcome anticipation anxiety before their flight. Mm-hmm. So this is somebody who's not necessarily avoiding flying because they're so fearful of it, but they are really uncomfortable, really anxious when they fly. So the buildup leading up to it is really exhausting. It might be one way to explain it. It really takes a lot out of it. Now, of course, it still applies to people who are very fearful, have higher degrees of fear on flying. So it can really apply to both. But I really thought about, there's a very specific problem that people have, even if they're still flying, that it's just the worry of the lead up. And so I really wanted to teach skills specific to that point of like, what do you do maybe a week before you fly? And then the other one is my bigger course, the Fearful Flyers Blueprint Program is what I call it. And that's really like if someone was to come work with me one-on-one in my therapy practice, like how I would basically teach them all the things that I would do one-on-one with them, but put it into the course. So it's much more comprehensive. And I think the better fit for I really think, of course, any fearful flyer could benefit, but I think the people that I have found who are interested in it and have been successful with it are the people where it's like, this has become a really strong point in my life where I avoid flying. I'm very afraid of it. And I've got a flight coming up in a few months. I want this to stop running my life and I need some help. And so they're looking for a deeper solution around it. Whereas a lot of anxious flyers are not necessarily, it's not like this huge problem in their life that they need like a therapist to help them solve, but they'd like some tips.
Okay, that's helpful. Price points for both. Mini is how much?
$57.
Okay.
And then the Fearful Flyers Blueprint is $247.
Okay, $247. Okay. And so is there any other offer? And the reason I'm asking is because if we're really focused on fearful flyers only going into the lead magnet, or are we more focused on folks that just have anxiety or some of these symptoms or some of these pain points that they're experiencing, and you're also offering maybe one-on-one is something unrelated to flying? So I'm just trying to make sure I understand who you're trying to attract with the lead magnet and where we're putting them.
Yeah. With this lead magnet, the only goal is attracting fearful flyers.
Okay, perfect. That's what I need. Okay, that's helpful. Okay, I understand where we're headed now. Let's go ahead and shift to the lead magnet itself. So I love you took one of our 8 use cases that we talk about on Launch Your Audio Lead Magnet, which is turning an existing PDF that you had into an audio lead magnet. So why don't you talk a little bit about the PDF? Before we get into copy or landing pages or that kind of stuff, tell us a little bit about the content, what was in it, kind of how you structured the audio lead magnet itself.
Yeah. So it was a previous PDF that was 12 tips, kind of like quick tips that somebody, whether they were, super fearful flying or just a little anxious, like it could apply to either one. And so they were just quick tips on a PDF. And then I broke that down with ChatGPT's help for my audio lead magnet to kind of chunk it into 3 episodes where there's like understanding flight anxiety, the lead up, and then during the flight. So like 3 kind of chunks. So each of those tips kind of falls into one of those buckets. And then my last episode is like kind of my call to action to them and telling them about what's next.
Okay. And you're giving them both options in this content, meaning, and I assume it's probably positioned as if you just want to kind of get started or just want to, like the mini course is probably for you if you know you're ready. And I'll ask you kind of how you're positioning both in the content, but I assume you're giving both as options.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Love this. All right, let's talk about the way that you have the funnel set up right now. So I assume I'm on the landing page right now. That's the landing page you're sending traffic to. Is that true?
Yep.
Okay. And then how many people have downloaded? I know it's been up for a while, for just a short amount of time. So I'm not expecting a ton of people to have gone through this yet, but how many people do you have right now?
22 total subscribers.
Okay. That's actually pretty good.
That's not bad. Yeah.
For being new and only having been up for a short time. Okay, great. So, all right, I'm on the landing page. Free private audio series for anxious flyers. Learn to manage your fear of flying with 12 calming tools from a therapist who's been there. Okay, perfect. And then you've got start the audio series now. And then underneath that, you kind of say what's inside, right? So short calming audio series created by a licensed therapist. Great to help you feel more prepared and in control. You'll learn 12 practical therapist recommended tips. Calm racing thoughts. Yep. Cope with panic. Yep. Great. Feel less trapped, more grounded on the plane. Great. All of this is fantastic. And then your personalized note on this landing pages too makes it feel a lot more personal and connected, which is fantastic. Okay. Awesome. I think all of this is very clear who it's for. We can maybe look at making some message tweaks just to maybe, right now it's a little bit new. So I wouldn't tell you like, do we have to make optimizations to the copy? I don't know if we're statistically significant with 22 folks that have opted in yet for me to say, hey, we need to make tweaks to this in order to improve conversions. I like to look at language that any offer, right? So lead magnet is still an offer, even though it's free, because if we want people to use their primary email address, that has value, right? And so they're exchanging that value of their primary email address and not their fake one or the one that they never check to the value that they're going to get out of this audio. And so we might, if I think about that offer, people are looking for time to value being short, like making sure that they understand it's easy. So that's the one good thing about an audio is that they can listen on the go. So we can incorporate some of the benefits of it being audio into the copy so that they know it's easy to listen to. We might want to say, I don't know how long the series is, but if it's 30 minutes or 15 minutes, it's like that makes it feel easier. So ease and convenience is something we want to make sure we're promoting on this landing page because that increases the perceived value of this offer for people. The other thing that people look for in an offer is certainty, right? Now, obviously, I can't guarantee success that we're going to cure their anxiety from flying, but in any offer that people opt into or purchase, even if it's with their email address, they're looking for the likelihood that they're going to get benefit out of it, that it's going to be worth their time, right? And so even things like phrases that would let them know, I mean, you being a licensed therapist, for example, these aren't just tips from like a random person. These are tips from someone who has over 15 years of experience, who has helped, like, I would assume hundreds of people, right, in your practice go through this, like that. So even maybe adding a testimonial or a number of how many people you've helped through their fear of flying, anything that would give evidence of the fact that they're going to listen to this content and get the benefit or value out of it. And that's the increased level of certainty or quote unquote guarantee. That's going to help the perceived value of this offer too. So anything we could do there is good. And, phrases like therapist tested strategies, I feel like could be powerful. Like you have therapist recommended, which is still good, but also therapist tested. Like that's a little bit stronger. Like we've used these before. Therapist tested strategies that actually worked, backed by over 15 years of clinical experience supporting people just like you. And you could say supporting hundreds of people just like you. That's like super strong. So I like that. Simple steps so that it feels easy. Now, the only other thing I think about, and you know your avatar better than we do, but I'm guessing this is not the first thing they have tried to download or consume to help them, right? So even something that leans into your unique value positioning a little bit stronger. So like, why is this different than everything else they've already tried? And just to address that, because that's probably, I know like when we purchase things for a business, right? We're like, how is this going to be different than everything else we're seeing on the internet? So even just one statement that leans into that. Now, granted, 15 years of experience does that to some extent because that, not every person they're watching on TikTok or Instagram has that level of experience. But even just something that would give them, why is this different? Would be helpful with perceived value as well with that messaging. So I think that could be something that's powerful. And then, all the audio benefits of listening on the go and, the easiest, the thing that you'll be able to take with you when you fly, right? I mean, I don't know if you use like meditations or other things that they think they need. Remember, you know what they need because your awareness level and education is a lot different than where they're at. Maybe they're thinking, I just need a meditation to get me through like the takeoff piece of this. But that, something like in a bonus meditation or whatever they think they might need to help them say like, this is so valuable for free, right? And then you're opening the door to the next step. And if she gave me all this value for free, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what's in her paid options. So those are the things I'm seeing right now without going too deep into copy. I do like the personalized note is really good too. Maybe even like you don't have to fly alone could be a good phrase too, because that might be something that'll feel a little different because it's more personal to them.
And I don't know Are you expecting them to be listening to this while they're taking off or anything like that? Because that's interesting from like a PDF difference. If we look at the private podcast angle, which I think also could work into the copy of like, take me along with you, and it's so accessible, like it's, pre-download it to your phone. You'll have it like, and that's like such a like travel. What am I listening to? What am I doing? Oh my gosh, I can take this person with me, whether it's meditate. So I don't know if there's something to potentially add to your private podcast, but Nora's point, like I'll actually finish this. I'll actually do it. I'm like going to listen on the flight, and that kind of thing makes it different than probably a lot of other offers around here like that.
That's a really great point too, because if I'm anxious and if I'm feeling anxiety about anything, I don't read. Like that is just not a natural thing for me. I would much rather just like close my eyes and listen, or I just can only consume information in certain ways that's not as overwhelming if I'm already in an anxious state of mind. And so I do think leaning into that is helpful here.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do have like a guided meditation I made that I kind of use as a different lead magnet that is it's not part of this private podcast series, but that could be a nice bonus
put it in,
to just combine it.
Okay. Yeah. Especially, that makes it even more valuable, I would say, like as a bonus. Yeah. And to be fair, because audio is so intimate, because you're establishing a stronger connection. This content that you're creating, even though it was in the PDF and it's similar, if I would have read that, I don't have as a strong connection with you as I do hearing your voice. Right. And that meditation, even, I think that makes it even stronger if you have someone's voice guiding you through something.
And I'll even add, right? Like this is how I process PDF lead magnets, because I've recently, downloaded some. I like literally either binge it right away and I'm like, what can I get out of this? Cool. But now I'm like very disconnected. And so I do it once and then I'm done, or it's super resourceful and I need it. But then like sometimes I don't know where it is. And for me, like other issues of if it's not top of mind, I can't see it, it's probably just gone. So audio is really key here, because whether the person binges it and listens to it right away, they know it's still there. And that's what's missing in like PDFs. I don't know where it ends up. And I actually know that I can access it later or whatever. And so I also just want to reiterate the point that I think like in particular for this exact market, it's going to be unlike anything they've downloaded before. And it's probably going to most likely be consumed and get them the results, which is exactly what we want for a lead magnet. And so just kind of putting the cherry on the top with like why a private podcast is so important, because again, they're going to either re-listen to it before they get on the flight or take you on the flight. Now we're talking about multiple touch points. Even though it's the same lead magnet, they're more likely to re-listen. They're more likely to like take you with them other places. That intimacy piece is yes, voice, and also the amount of touch points. And I think that's key with like this particular offer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's why I was so excited when I became a Hello Audio user, because I had a YouTube, channel where I was just putting private listed, YouTubes up and sending that to people and that no one's going to.
It worked and then until it doesn't. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah.
Until I learned of a better system. Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, this will be good.
Cool.
I love that. Yeah, that feels good. I think there's a couple of tweaks you can make. And again, not that I have statistical evidence to tell you that it needs to, but I think even those tweaks that we've highlighted can make this even stronger on the opt-in conversion side. So I think with that, let's assume that we're going to get a bunch more people in here. Let's talk a little bit about how you've got the content organized. So at a high level, you don't need to go in a ton of detail, but just at a high level, the episode, how many episodes. Here's why I'm asking. I'm just going to frame this so that we can think about it this way. Ultimately, in order for the listener to purchase one of your two courses, they need to believe something. They need to have perceived needs. We need to have addressed some underlying fears that they might have about purchasing that. And we need to kind of create some emotion. If they're uncertain, or if they don't believe it's going to work for them, they're not going to purchase whatever option, right? The mini course or the other more comprehensive course. And so the content that we're architecting in these episodes are really geared to lead with empathy, right? We want to make sure that we demonstrate that we understand that their situation, and you have plenty of experience to do that. We also want to demonstrate our ability to help them, right? We're making a connection with them. We're giving them value. And then we're making the invitation to help join, right? So we're purposely using these episodes and this content to shift maybe some false beliefs or build new ones or help them have the epiphany that this is different and this is actually what they need. And then help them get to that point from point A when they meet their opt-in to point B when we want them to purchase, so that they're most likely to purchase. So if we could walk through the content that you have in there, just so I can understand the journey or the conversation we're having with these listeners before, and then we can talk a little bit more in detail about the call to action and how you're framing that invitation.
Okay, cool. I'm going to look at my script of those so I can kind of be concise here. So yeah, episode 1 is all about understanding flight anxiety, setting them up for success. So I talk a little bit about my own personal journey and of course my professional experience. So just talk about how I got to this point and what they're going to get out of the podcast. And then I talk about understanding flight anxiety. I don't go into it too in depth, but I kind of introduce the idea that it's not all about the plane, right? It's like we don't need to be just like there's more to it than that, right? There's this bigger backstory that we have to address. So I kind of, I guess, tease that a little bit, that it's, you have certain triggers around flying, but there's really more to it than that. And I kind of insert here where you can waste a lot of time and energy with other fear of flying, like experts out there, because they're teaching just about like flight mechanics, for instance. And we don't just do that. We actually do more of like the psychological aspect. So I kind of introduce, you got to get clear on your fear so that you know how to move forward and to find the best resources for you. I then go into talking about one of the major pieces that makes us different as well, that one of the biggest components to what we teach is that you actually have to be willing to have anxious feelings rather than focus on getting rid of them and not having them at all and just searching for calm. And so that was a component. And then talking about issues around control, helping them refocus where they can control. So that kind of covers the first episode. And then the second episode, I go into kind of giving them some practical tips about that pre-flight process. So I'm talking about, again, I'm kind of keep on teasing the like, here's where most people try to fix this problem or get relief, but like we see it differently. And I try not to give too much because that's kind of where my course is, meant to help. Sure. And then I do talk about just some more practical kind of quick tips, making like anxiety relief kit. Introduce a relaxation exercise, and I like do like a quick micro little demo of it, but I don't do a full guidance of it, but I kind of show them a brief part of it. I do some storytelling here too, just like using this stuff with myself. Tell them why, like just facts and logic about the safety of flying doesn't really help. It doesn't get you anywhere. So again, that's part of, I think, that unique positioning that we were talking about earlier. Yep. There's a lot of just other resources that focus on that approach that's not as heavily focused on ours. And then another tip kind of similar to that, where I kind of just insert how we're a little bit different on what we do around the anticipation anxiety, how we do that and where the problem is, but I don't necessarily teach them how too much in depth. I talk a little bit about, you already know the facts. You've already done Googling. You've already done all this stuff, right? And it's not working.
Yep.
And that's why, like, we have what we have. And then in the third episode, we talk about the in-flight strategies, what you can do, like, during the flight itself. Here you are. Yep, you've made it to this point, but you're feeling really anxious. And so I give them a couple ideas about how to reframe their anxious thoughts from like, what if something goes wrong, to like staying more grounded and reframing some of those what ifs. So I give, a couple examples of that. A tip on like how to get support from the flight crew themselves while they're there, how to, again, use deep breathing, kind of common mistakes I see around it, but don't fully guide them through it, just kind of giving them a quick intro to that. Something they can bring with them. So here's an example. I think that also speaks to that like kind of unique piece, I talk about like noise canceling headphones is a really great strategy for people who are triggered by all the different noises on a flight and why that's so triggering. But then I say like, that's really great when you're starting. But when I'm working with people in my programs or in therapy, like I actually want them to kind of wean off of that. I tell them I don't do that anymore because I've worked on my fear. I've been able to kind of unbreak from the fear. So it's a good like strategy right now if you need something right now, but that's not your end game.
Okay. I like that.
And that's it. And then, like I said, I go into the 4th episode where I then talk about here's your like 2 options if you want to go a little bit further.
Okay. Before we get to the call to action, I just want to recap what I've heard.
Okay.
Because what I'm hearing is that these episodes so far is giving your listener clarity around where to really focus, right? Because you're helping them have the epiphany of, we all been told it's this. When I have my other family members are trying, it was like, yeah, but they were all statistics and like, it was cars are more dangerous. And, you've heard it all, all the stats more than I do. And she was like, yeah, okay, whatever. That doesn't help me at all.
Yeah.
So thanks. I appreciate the stats, but also, okay, I'm still going to be, I still don't like it. So calling that out, I think is really, really important and helping them have the epiphany around, actually, that's not helpful because some of your people are going to think, I don't know why I can't get over this.
Right.
Like because of how other people approach it in this industry or in this space, it's like, why is this such a big deal for you? Like it's not logical. It's not common sense. And so, I think leading with empathy, especially for you in that first episode, making sure that you're describing how they feel, both in terms of the anxiety, not that I need you to freak them out or cause their heart to race or whatever, but I need you to use words that are emotional. That'd be like, that's exactly how I feel. Or I understand that. So it demonstrates your ability to be like, yep, I understand exactly where you're at. And you've probably been told the stats and you've been told. And so, but none of that is helping. And this podcast series or this private podcast series is going to tell you exactly why. Like hook them from the start. And then you can introduce yourself and then like build more rapport. But that first episode, like the first 30 seconds of that, I want them to feel it, that you understand exactly how they feel, like physically. And the more language you can use, again, I'm not trying to freak them out or cause a heart attack, but I want them to understand that I want them to feel it in their bodies, that you understand what their experience is like so that they continue to listen. That's going to be really powerful. And then all of the other episodes flow in terms of helping. It's not the plane, it's not the flying, it's not the flight mechanics. You're giving them tips for the phases and breaking it down in a very lot. So I don't know how many people they've worked with that have broken it down into anticipation and, pre-flight and on the flight kind of a phase. So I think that gives them something to anchor to, which I think is really going to be powerful for them. And not that you have to go into a bunch of how, but even explaining the what of those phases will help them be like, oh, I get it. Now I understand why that hasn't worked for me in the past. And storytelling is a big deal. And bonus points if you can have stories that are from existing folks in audio that, even explains how especially the before and after. So what I mean by that, the most powerful testimonials that you can use in your business or stories are the ones that explain the clear before and after. Like, I was like this, and then I worked with you, and then I was able, and I never would have thought I was able to do that. Like I would never have thought I was able to go on a flight without my noise canceling headphones or something like that. I think that's really important, or medication or whatever it is for that person. And if you don't, that's fine. But I do think, having those would even make it a little bit stronger. And then I like the build up, especially because what you're doing is you're also talking about the emotion and how to take their power back. So when you were describing the sequencing, it's like we start in that anxiety, like, yes, this is where I'm at. But then as you move in your episodes, you actually start to give them back control. And you start to kind of create like your future pacing a little bit, and you're giving them hope about what it could be like, not in a way that's like, well, I did it and you can do it too, but in a way that's very, demonstrating that you understand and demonstrating that there's a process for this and demonstrating that you have a framework to address this and you've done it with hundreds of people. I think that is really going to be important for them to have the confidence to take the next step.
Yeah. Cool. I do have some testimonials that I've been able to collect recently. My course is really fairly new, just like in the last year. So I'm still getting people enrolled in that course. And the thing that's tricky is, as a therapist, there's
Yes.
there's a lot of privacy related things. And so like with my course, I'm not doing therapy. So I feel very good about being able to like get testimonials from that and do that appropriately. There's a lot of people I work with one-on-one where I can't. So that's been a interesting line I've had to walk.
Yes, and totally understand that. I think in some cases you may work with someone that is willing to do an anonymous testimonial. They don't need to. And for something like audio, even if someone else's voice, even if they're not named, they're not even going to remember that person's name anyway, to be fair. That's not what they're keying into in that moment. And so you could use something like that. And if it's from the course, that's fine too. And the good thing about audio is that it's really easy to swap and edit. And so if you don't have that now, cool, no problem. But once you do have maybe more testimonials or from the course itself, or maybe someone you've worked with, a family member that might be willing to give you some, a clip anonymously, you can easily slip that in and just swap out the audio. And then everyone who has access to that, their audio automatically refreshes anyway. So it's not like you have to do anything major for people to have access to that. Okay, walk me through the invitation. So let's go through that, because this is probably the most powerful piece of it. You're already building beliefs, you're building the emotion, you're helping people have the epiphanies that they need in order to be like, all right, this is actually what I need. This is the course I need, and it's going to work for me. But talk to me about the content in this invitation episode.
Yeah. So I start with kind of just saying, like, you've picked up a lot of tools, insights, here so far. But if you're serious about some change around this, I use much better words in this, but I'm paraphrasing, and you want to go from somebody who's, fearful and really anxious about it to someone who's not thinking twice, then there is more work to do, or there is another step. And so I acknowledge that there's a lot of nuance around flight anxiety. A lot of people believe that it's a fear of the plane crashing. And in fact, there's a lot more fears that go into it and a lot more things. And so it's not so simple. Not that it's not simple, but it's not as obvious. And not all the tools work for the same anxious flyer. And it really depends on where your fear is rooted from. And that kind of ties back to, I think, one of the first things I talked about in the first episode. So I guide them through, I basically introduce, I have two options. So, and I introduce it like, I think how I introduced it to you girls in the beginning, like, if you're somebody who, is planning to fly, you're anxious about it, you haven't avoided it completely, these are going to be some great skills on how to help that anticipation anxiety part. And so that's a good fit for you. If you're somebody who's really been avoiding it, you fear, the panic, you've been avoiding it for a long time, you want a full system to like rewire your relationship to fear, then that's where the next course is going to be most helpful. It kind of goes beyond just symptom management and more of like, how do we like lift up the fear here? Yeah. So I think that's high level overview.
Okay. That's helpful. Okay. 2 tweaks I want to make to this, because I want them to feel like purchasing one of these courses is a continuation of working with you, right? Mm-hmm. So like if we want to continue working together, there's 2 options. So I like that positioning a little bit. It's a little bit stronger because they get access to you, right? They get access to your expertise and your experience and your knowledge, and you understand. I mean, I love the fact that you're phrasing like there are a bunch of nuances with people and not everything works with it, and that's why I've developed these other resources. So if we want to continue working together, but I like that because you are a licensed therapist, right? And having access to your knowledge base and your experience is super valuable. And it also takes the framing off of them. So it's like, I could say, if you want to continue, if you want to work harder, if you want to, like, not that you'd ever say that part of it, but it's almost like it's getting access to your gold mine of tools and strategies. Like, of course I would want to continue working with you, but I do like that framing a little bit better. And I like, you've learned these simple strategies. I'd love to continue working together. Or if you want to continue working together, I like that. Then in terms of how I would sequence the offer, I always sequence the more expensive offer first. I anchor against that every time because I want to make that, like, if you had to pick, which one do you want to sell the most? That one. You want to sell, right? So I would start with that one and frame it as like the place for them to be. And if they're not ready for that, then we also have this other option. So it's almost like the big choice, the best choice is that main course. And then say, but if you're looking for something, smaller, or not that you want to make it sound bad, but it's just a framing thing. And if I was going to pick, if I had 10 people listening, I want all 10 to purchase that, core offer. And if they don't, and they want something else to start with or something smaller, then I would want them to go. But I would flip the order of those because you'll end up seeing potentially higher conversions on the higher priced course than the micro course or the mini course.
Got it.
Those are the two I would, and then obviously in the show notes, you have links, and I would put them in the universal, like, so in Hello Audio, you can use the universal show notes. So it shows up in every episode. I would not wait to put your sales page links in the final episode. It would be in every single episode. And it would just frame it. If you want to continue working together, there are two options, 1, 2. And then you can explain, you can kind of use the sales verbiage about, again, start with the main one. And then, if you're looking for something, blah, 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 then, we have another option for you too. But in every single episode, I would have those. And then in any follow-up sequences you have, so we didn't really talk about this part of it, but when people get access to this, usually the folks that experience, Hello Audio users that experience the highest conversions are also sending email follow-ups that kind of correspond to the content as well. Now, I mean, this is probably a bingeable thing. It's not like you're dripping out content. And so you can just refer back to, like, have you tried the exercise in episode 3? Right? If not, you want to check that out or something like that. And then make sure you're putting all of your sales links in those emails as well. And then also make sure, some of those emails could be asking for feedback. Are you liking it so far? Like, what are you finding the most valuable? Anything that you can use to get some interaction is usually a good thing as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, I do have a 3-part email follow-up. I think I could tweak it with some of the things you're saying too. I think.
Just teasing the content is usually helpful. Like getting them excited, like, oh, I missed that. What was that? Or like, because people, I mean, I know I can't speak for Lindsay, but I know for myself, like I'll start listening and we have kids, so we get distracted, right? And so we're like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, I really did mean to go back to that. And then it just was not on top of mind. And so an email reminder about like episode 3 that I didn't get to would be really helpful. And then obviously those links keep it top of mind for you, because if I'm on my podcast player, chances are I'm in the car, I might be at the grocery store, I might be somewhere where I'm not necessarily going to remember my credit card number or something like that. So those emails might push more sales than you think, just because when they're listening, they're not necessarily in a place to sit down and purchase. It just depends. Like, we've seen conversions both ways, but it's nice to have that reminder of like, oh yeah, I did really like that. And I've been meaning to do that. And I just got distracted.
Yeah. Where I'm trying to figure out too, because I came into this world, of course, starting with the webinars. And so, there's that idea of like kind of creating the urgency and having open cart, closed cart, all that stuff. So I'm trying to figure out, like, I really don't want to continue live launching anymore. That's not what I want to do. So one thought I had was, do I shift my 4th episode to actually be kind of a condensed version of my former webinar, using that? And then do I add in some kind of urgency? Do I talk about the price point and all that? Or do I just, like, I'm trying to think like, how much do I match what I used to do?
Okay, this is a great question, first and foremost, because Evergreen and live launching is very different. And so I will say this, at the price points that you're working with, they're not multiple thousands of dollars where I feel like we need to do a ton of discounts or stuff like that to get people to buy. Because, and the reason I'm saying that in this specific case is that the fear of flying is so disruptive to people's lives that they will pay to solve that pain point because it's very valuable for them, right? The peace of mind, like their life experience, all of that. This is more of like that, painkiller versus vitamin stuff that marketers always talk about. So in that case, I don't think it's super necessary to give a ton of incentives to get them to purchase. For also something like fear of flying, Evergreen will because people fly it all the time. So live launches might have been working against you in the past on the timing standpoint because I've got vacations coming up or I've got spring break or whatever it is or a work trip. And I needed to purchase this at that moment. So you might actually find, and I would test this, that Evergreen is just a naturally better converter for you without having to do anything, without having to add a time-sensitive bonus, without having to add a time-sensitive promotion. Now, that said, could you absolutely add time-sensitive bonuses or time-sensitive, with Hello Audio, you can do that with dynamic content. You could swap out the audio for a certain amount of time if you wanted to add something if they bought during the month of April or during the month of May, you could absolutely do that. Do I think you need to complicate it and start there? Not necessarily. I would wait and see what your conversions are. And then if we feel like compared to where your live launches were, if you want to boost those conversions, then I would consider some of those things. My default is always add to, not do discounts. Mm-hmm. So I'm always trying to increase the perceived value of that offer. Maybe it's just an additional meditation. And maybe you give the meditation series to anyone who joins. But if you purchase this month, if you buy during this month, you'll get the meditation series. So it sounds like it's time sensitive, but they don't really know which month it is, right? So you could do stuff like that to keep it simple for yourself, especially until you start getting more data back and then decide if you want to start adding in some layers of complexity there.
Okay. Helpful.
Yeah. I'm excited. I almost think we're going to need a follow-up to see how things are going. Because I think this is, you're going to help a lot of people with this. I think that's really the biggest thing is, having audio, I think will make it a lot easier for you to reach your people. It'll make it a lot easier for them to consume this content. And that's really, really cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
You have a good to-do list here, I think.
Sure do.
Yeah.
Do you have recommendations for how, I'm trying to think about, I put a lot of work into where things are at right now. I do have a small number I'm working with. And so I don't want to over tweak in the process and just let things ride as they are. So is there a benchmark you recommend? Wait for 100 people to opt in, 200.
I like 100 personally.
I like
it's
100.
Just a typical goal.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, if you got to 50 and no one purchased, okay, we can take a look at it. But then I'd look at are those people already on your list and they just downloaded it because they love you? Is it your mom because you did something new? My mom would opt in and she would have no idea. But I like 100 because that feels statistically significant and it allows me to then look at percentages really cleanly and maybe take some action based on that.
Cool.
I'll say too, this early stage with the, 22 people, I don't know how comfortable you feel, but, check out your super listener scores, see who's listening, possibly reach out if, any way to get some level of, it doesn't need to be did you like it? Did you think it's great? It could just be hey, I'm also here on Instagram or whatever your main platform of choice is. I'm here to help you. I really want to help you. I think could also go pretty far too. So I always say when, high touch stuff, it does very well. And I think a lot of people let go of that sooner than they should. And so when you're with this small, it's doable. But I even think even when it's bigger, it's doable. But that's another thing that you could do right now. And you could get feedback. It could be a point of maybe less, did you like it? Is it the best thing ever? It could more be hey, I'm doing 15-minute coffee chats with people about how this worked and really fully present it as information gathering of I just launched this. I just want, to know how, if there was anything you wish was in there, I don't know, open the door. And those things can often turn into sales without any intention. And I'm not even saying it for that intention, actually, because it's so early, get some good feedback and connect with these people. That's huge.
I love that. I did have one person who scheduled a consultation with me through my therapy practice who I think she kind of knew, but I wasn't going to be able to work with her because she's in a different state. And that's, of course, the hang up as a therapist. I'm only able to treat people in therapy in my state. But like she went through the whole lead magnet and she gave me some feedback on the things she liked. Cool. She hasn't purchased yet, but she expressed the intent to. So I'm like, okay, like that's helpful feedback right away. And I love the idea of reaching out even specifically for that.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
And there's always a way to like, hey, I'll buy you a coffee, send them a $5 Starbucks gift card or something like that. Is a nice way to do it too. Cause you're kind of asking for their time. So yeah.
Good idea. Cool.
All right, my dear. Well, this has been super fun. Thank you for opening yourself up to this process. Hopefully it was helpful. We think this is a great product. I think you're going to have great success with it. So yeah, keep us posted for sure.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This was amazing.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Take care.
You too.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.